Um, I want you to imagine this scenario for a second. It's a Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
You wake up, you pour your coffee, you sit down at the kitchen table, and silence.
You mean the kids are actually at school for once?
No, no, I don't mean the house is quiet. I mean inside your head. Total, absolute silence.
Yep.
No to-do list scrolling in the background like a ticker tape. No song stuck on repeat.
Right.
No low-level hum of anxiety about that email you sent last night where you maybe sounded a little too passive-aggressive. It is just blank.
I mean, that sounds peaceful to some, but I imagine for a lot of people, especially the type of people who listen to our deep dives, that would be absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it sounds like a malfunction. You would probably think, did I stroke out? Is my hard drive erased? But what if I told you that for a growing number of people, this isn't a medical crisis, but a spiritual breakthrough?
It is such a fascinating phenomenon. And to navigate it, we are doing a deep dive today into a talk by Dr. Yang Dingy. For those who aren't familiar with him, Dr. Yang is a really unique figure in this space. He is a doctor, a scientist with a very heavy background in immunology and microbiology, but he's also a prolific author. He bridges that massive, often treacherous gap between hard medical science and deep esoteric spiritual practice.
And the specific talk we are unpacking today tackles this exact blank scenario, experiencing a state of emptiness, or what in Eastern traditions they call Kong. But here is the kicker, and this is exactly why I wanted to cover this specific source. It is not just a travelogue of a trippy spiritual experience.
No, it's much more pragmatic than that.
Right. It is a manual for what you do after.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, most spiritual stories end at the exact moment of enlightenment. Boom, you get it. The clouds part, roll credits.
Happily ever after.
Exactly. But nobody tells you that you still have to pay your taxes, navigate traffic, and, do the dishes the next day.
That is precisely the mission of this deep dive. We are moving from the realization, that moment of getting it, to the actualization, or living it. Dr. Yang offers a very grounded and honestly a surprisingly rigorous protocol for life after that big aha moment.
So let's start with the phenomenon itself.
Yeah.
Because in the source material, Dr. Yang mentions he's seeing this more and more. In the US, Brazil, Asia, it is popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
What is actually happening biologically or mentally to these people when the lights go out upstairs?
He describes it as a sudden, spontaneous evolution. For some, it lasts a few hours, and for others, days. The defining characteristic isn't just that they are calm, it is that the mind becomes non-stick.
Non-stick. I really like that image, like a Teflon pan for your neuroses.
That is a perfect way to picture it. Think about your normal brain state. A thought arises like, I need to buy milk, and it hooks onto another thought.
Milk is getting expensive.
Exactly. Which hooks onto, I am worried about the economy, and suddenly you are spiraling into existential dread over dairy.
Yeah.
But in this non-stick state, the thought to buy milk arises, and then it just slides off. It dissolves. There is this immense sense of spaciousness.
Which sounds lovely in theory, but as a functioning adult with actual responsibilities, I can see the panic setting in. If I cannot worry about my schedule, how do I actually get to my meetings on time?
That is the #1 reaction. People experience this emptiness and immediately think, I am broken, I have lost my edge. They scramble to their intellectual library to label it.
Right, like, is this the void? Is this Zen? Is this dissociation?
They try to pin the butterfly down with a definition because the silence is unnerving.
They are trying to use the old operating system to understand why the computer crashed.
Precisely. And that effort to label it, to analyze it, is actually the opposite of the state itself. But Dr. Yang has a pretty radical take on what this emptiness actually represents. He argues that this isn't a hallucination or break from reality. He says this is the first time you are actually seeing reality with a capital R.
Okay, let's go deeper on that. Because to me, reality is the traffic jam, the mortgage, the cold coffee. That feels pretty real. How can emptiness be more real than that?
This is where Dr. Yang puts his scientist hat on and talks about sensory processing. He argues that what we call normal life, that daily grind, the sensory input, is actually a form of deep biological brainwashing.
Brainwashing, that is a heavy word to use.
He uses it intentionally. Think about it. From the moment you are born, you are conditioned by 5 specific inputs: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. We are biologically wired to believe that what we perceive with these sensors is the only universe.
Right.
We get trapped in a closed loop of cause and effect, or what he calls karma. We assume A causes B, and that is the whole story.
So we are essentially living in a box painted by our senses.
Worse, he uses the imagery of being buried deep in mud. Imagine you are completely submerged in thick, heavy mud. You cannot see anything outside of it. You feel the pressure, the texture, the dirt. you would eventually conclude that the mud is the whole world.
Because it is all you know.
Exactly. That moment of emptiness, that sudden silence, that is you managing to poke one eye out of the mud for a split second.
And you realize, oh, wow, there's air, there's sky. The mud isn't everything.
Yes. The non-stick state is simply you seeing the limitations of the senses for the first time. The mud is still there, you still have a body, you still have bills, but you realize you aren't of the mud. You are the observer of it.
That is such a vivid image, poking your head out of the mud. But I have to imagine that has to be a shock to the system. You don't just go back to eating breakfast after realizing your whole life has been a mud illusion.
No, you don't. And the source material highlights a really stark contrast between how different people react to this poking their head out moment. It seems to depend heavily on age or perhaps world weariness.
Right, he breaks it down into two distinct responses, the laugh and the cry. Let's start with the laugh. I'm guessing this isn't the adults with the back pain and the mortgages.
No, this is usually the younger crowd, teens, people in their early 20s. When they hit this state of realization, their reaction is often this huge belly laugh. He compares it to Maitreya Buddha, the laughing Buddha.
But why are they laughing? Is it like a hysterical shock?
It is relief, it's comedy, because they haven't been polluted by decades of societal conditioning yet. They see the truth that the mud isn't real, and they realize, oh, there was never a problem to begin with.
Oh.
It is like finding out the monster in the closet was just a pile of laundry. It's funny to them.
Well, it must be nice to find that out at 20. But then there's the rest of us, the adults. We don't laugh.
Adults tend to weep. Dr. Yang describes mature adults crying uncontrollably when they have this realization.
That sounds really tragic.
Yeah.
Why the tears if they just found ultimate freedom?
It looks tragic from the outside, but it is actually a massive release. Think about the adult experience. You have spent 30, 40, 50 years fighting, struggling, feeling pain, dealing with loss. Dr. Yang calls it bumping into nails.
Yeah, that resonates.
You have built your whole identity around overcoming these struggles. You have taken it all so incredibly seriously.
And then you poke your head out of the mud and realize the struggle was what? Fake.
Unnecessary. You realize you have been running on a treadmill for 20 years thinking you were climbing Everest. You feel cheated in a way. You feel like you were fooled by your senses in your own brain. So you cry for the time lost. You cry for the person you thought you were.
I can feel that. That profound sense of, why didn't anyone tell me this sooner? I could have relaxed decades ago.
But, and this is a crucial point in the talk, Dr. Yang emphasizes that both reactions are perfect. He says even the trauma, the pain, and the suffering were just right.
Just right. Okay, that is a hard sell. If you have been through real trauma, hearing that it was just right might feel pretty dismissive.
It is very hard to hear from the perspective of the ego. But the perspective here is that those struggles were the necessary friction. You wouldn't be asking, who am I or why am I here if everything had been perfectly easy.
That makes sense.
If the mud was comfortable, you wouldn't try to escape it. So in the grand scheme, the suffering was perfectly tailored to force you to wake up.
Okay, that reframing definitely helps. It gives the pain a purpose. So let's say you have had the glimpse. You have laughed. You have cried. The mind is totally silent. Now comes the danger zone. Dr. Yang warns about a specific trap here.
The trap of the wow.
The spiritual ego.
Exactly. The experience feels so good, so profound, that people instinctively try to possess it. They want to analyze it, dissect it, write a book about it, or force it to happen again. They treat emptiness like a trophy they want to put on the shelf to show their friends.
Look at my shiny enlightenment moment. I am so much more spiritual than you are.
Precisely. And they waste years trying to replay the highlight reel. Dr. Yang's advice is incredibly blunt. Stop. Do not obsess over the experience. The emptiness isn't the destination. It is just the reset button.
So it's not the movie itself. It is just the moment you turned on the TV.
He compares it to being reborn. The past is gone. The old operating system is wiped clean. You are starting over from zero. So sitting around talking about how great the reset button felt is a waste of time. You have a new life to live.
Which brings us to the core of this deep dive. The after protocol. This is what I was really interested in. If we aren't supposed to just sit in a cave and enjoy the silence, what is the actual work?
This is where Dr. Yang surprises a lot of people. You might expect a complex esoteric ritual or hours of chanting, but his instruction is incredibly simple. Be a good person.
Wait, that is it. Be a good person. That sounds like advice I would get from a kindergarten teacher, not a mystic.
It sounds simple, but the application he demands is incredibly high level. He talks about living out the paramitas. In Buddhism, these are the perfections of virtue. Generosity, discipline, patience, honesty. Or in the Christian tradition, the fruits of the Spirit.
So it's not just be nice in a polite, superficial way.
No, not at all. It is about total immersion. He uses this beautiful metaphor. Imagine you are a prince or a princess on a desert island. You are completely alone. No social media, no audience, no one to impress. Do you stop washing your face? Do you lose your manners? Do you just let yourself go?
I mean, probably. If no one is watching, why bother shaving? I would be in sweatpants 24/7.
Dr. Yang says no. That is the test. You maintain your dignity. You stay clean, you stay healthy, you hold your head high, not for a reward, not for approval, but because that is your nature. You are radiating light simply because you are light.
So true integrity is what you do when literally no one is watching. It is internal, not performative.
Exactly. It is about bringing a sense of elegance and order to every single moment, whether you are addressing the UN or scrubbing your own toilet. That is the practice. It is about aligning your outer behavior with that inner spaciousness you just found.
He also gets really specific about generosity. And this part really caught my attention because he redefined what it means to be charitable. It is not just about writing checks to charity.
Right. Generosity can be a kind word, a smile, a hopeful thought. But here's the critical detail, and this is the hardest part of the entire protocol. You have to do it without thinking.
Without thinking. That goes against everything we are taught. We are taught to budget, to assess risk, to be careful.
He calls it being spontaneous, childlike.
Yeah.
He says if you have an impulse to be kind, say to buy a coffee for the person behind you in line, and you hesitate even for a split second to let your brain calculate the cost, you have failed.
Wow, that is harsh.
But necessary, because that split-second hesitation, that is the old operating system kicking back in. That is the brainwashing of the small self saying, wait, do I have enough? Is this weird? What if they reject me?
I am totally guilty of this all the time. I will have a thought to compliment a stranger, and then immediately the filter comes up. Like, that is creepy, don't say that, and the moment just passes.
And Dr. Yang would say, you just blocked the flow of the universe. The after protocol is about trusting that generous impulse instantly. If the heart says give, you give. You beat the logic brain to the punch. It is about becoming shuang kuai, which translates from Chinese to something like refreshingly straightforward or brisk.
That actually segues perfectly into the deepest part of his talk. Because to act that spontaneously, to stop calculating every nickel and dime of your energy, you need a massive amount of trust.
You need faith. And Dr. Yang notes that this is the missing ingredient in our modern intellectual culture. We are so smart, so educated, we have so much data, but we have zero faith.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, we aren't necessarily talking about religious dogma here.
Yeah.
He is not saying join this specific church and donate 10%.
Correct. He is talking about trusting the whole. Call it God, the universe, the Tao, or just the true self. The logic is actually quite scientific. The whole is infinitely smarter than you are.
How so?
Look at your body. Right now, your body is performing millions of chemical reactions, regulating your temperature, pumping blood, fighting off bacteria. You, the conscious you, aren't doing any of that. If you had to consciously manage your liver function, you would be dead in 10 seconds.
It's so true. I can barely manage my inbox, let alone my liver enzymes.
Exactly. So why do we think that small self, the one that cannot even manage a liver, should be in charge of our entire destiny? Dr. Yang says the ultimate practice is to hand over the keys.
Jesus, take the wheel.
Literally. Surrender the keys to life to that greater intelligence. Stop trying to micromanage the universe. Admit that the whole knows better.
And what happens when you do that? When you really, truly let go? Because from the outside, that feels like losing control.
It feels like losing control of the illusion, but what you gain is an orbit of faith. He says when you stop calculating and start trusting, you don't need to constantly repent or feel guilty about your past because you are already in a state of surrender. You are flowing with the current instead of constantly swimming upstream.
It sounds like such an unbelievable relief to just finally say, okay, I am not the CEO of the world.
It is the ultimate relief.
But this brings up a really practical question. If we are surrendering entirely to the whole, do we even need a teacher? Dr. Yang talks about the role of a guru or a guide. Is that still relevant today? Or is that just another attachment we need to drop?
He says, yes, it is relevant, but not for the reasons we usually think. In the West, we think a teacher is there to give us information, to lecture us.
Right. Here's the syllabus. Learn this, take the test.
But we are already drowning in information. We don't need more facts. Dr. Yang says a teacher is there for resonance. Think of it like a tuning fork.
A tuning fork. Okay, walk me through that.
If you have a piano that is out of tune, you strike a tuning fork that is perfectly pitched, you bring it close to the string, and the string starts to vibrate in sympathy. You don't need to yell at the string to get in tune. You just need to be near the right pitch.
So the teacher holds the frequency and you just have to hang out near them.
Essentially, you connect with their heart to verify your own vibration. But, and here's the massive catch, to get that benefit, you have to drop judgment.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning if you are sitting there critiquing the teacher's haircut or their accent or thinking they don't really look like a holy person, you are blocking the resonance. You are putting up a wall. You have to open your heart completely to receive that tuning.
That is difficult. We are trained to be critical consumers of everything. We Yelp review every experience, including our spiritual teachers.
And that critical mind is exactly what keeps us stuck in the mud. Dr. Yang mentions that eventually, if you drop the judgment and allow the resonance, the student realizes they are the exact same as the teacher. There is no hierarchy in the truth.
And that leads to the final stage he talks about, service.
Yes.
Yeah.
Once you realize you are the same, you naturally want to serve. He talks about rolling out the red carpet for the age of Maitreya, the age of compassion and joy. It isn't a burden or a job you apply for. It is just what you do when you realize we are all connected. You want to spread the light because you are the light.
So let's bring this all together. We have gone from the total silence of the mind to rolling out the red carpet of service. It is quite the arc for one deep dive.
It really is. We started with that startling non-stick state, poking your head out of the mud to actually see reality. We saw how the youth laugh at the absurdity of it, and the adults cry for the time they lost.
We talked about the trap. Don't get stuck analyzing the reset button. Push it and then get to work.
And the work is deceptively simple. Live with the dignity of a prince on a desert island. Be kind, and most importantly, be generous without thinking about it.
And ultimately, surrender the keys.
So what for me here is really powerful. Enlightenment isn't an escape hatch. It is not about leaving the world behind to float on a cloud and ignore your responsibilities. It is about re-entering the world. You are reborn so that you can be a better, simpler, kinder participant in this life. You trust the universe so you can finally relax and be helpful.
I really love that. It is not about checking out, it is about checking back in, but with a totally different attitude.
Exactly. You check in as a volunteer, not a victim.
So here is the challenge for you listening today. And I want to push you on this one because it's definitely the hardest part of Dr. Yang's protocol. We talked about that spontaneous generosity, the do it before you think method.
The half-second rule.
Right. So the next time you have a flash of an impulse, a tiny voice that says, send that encouraging text, buy that coffee, help that person with their bag act on it, instantly.
Before your logic brain has a chance to tell you it is a bad idea or too expensive.
Beat the hesitation. Trust the impulse. And see if that doesn't make your world and the world around you just a little bit brighter. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
It was a pleasure.
We will see you next time.